Margaret Lacey, Anna's mother, was now approaching 50, but her energy and youthful looks were the envy of many younger women. She had been born just before the outbreak of the First World War, within a dozen miles of her present home. Her father had been a miller and had lived and worked all his life in the tall, lovely building which stood by the waters of the River Low. The sound of the rushing mill race was the background music to her happy upbringing, so much so that when she went to stay elsewhere, she would lie awake at night missing the voice of those tumbling waters which normally hushed her to sleep. She was the youngest of 4 children. Her father, James North, a burly, red-faced giant of a man, had brought up his 2 boys and 2 girls to lead as energetic a life as his own. His wife had been of gentler stuff, although she baked and mended and ran her boisterous household with method and cheerfulness. There was a quality of secret reserve about her, which her family recognised, but with the exception of Margaret, did not understand. Poetry she loved, and the wildflowers and animal life of the countryside. Limped back editions of Browning and Tennyson lay beside her bed, and in her gleaming drawing room, bowls of primroses scented the air in spring, and the tang of autumn was carried into the house with the great sprays of tawny leaves, which she bore home from her solitary walks. More often than not, some small wounded creature, a bird with a broken wing or a nestful of baby mice orphaned by the hay cutter, would be receiving care and hospitality in the great kitchen, and Margaret shared her mother's compassion, treating the rest of the family's good-natured teasing with the same unsentimental charity which characterised all her mother's actions. Margaret had cycled with her brothers and sister into the market town 6 miles away for her schooling, and that over, had worked at the council offices, where overlooking the wide river which earlier in its course had splashed past her mill home. She had entered into the life of the friendly little town, acting in the dramatic club plays, playing tennis and boating with other young people, but still in her dinner hours she would go away into the library nearby or where the local bookshop was, and find her way to the shelves where the modern poets could be found, a secret joy which she was to endure through her whole life. She had known Patrick Lacey and his family from her school days. He was a hefty, good-tempered young man, a stalwart, forward in the local rugby team, and a welcome addition to any party in the neighbourhood. His father farmed within a few miles of Margaret's home, and he too worked there and would eventually take it over. He and Margaret slipped into marriage naturally and happily, after a brief courtship notable for its complete lack of lovers' quarrels. They had set up house in a cottage on the farm, but within 6 months Patrick's father had died and the young couple moved into the farmhouse. And it was here, one snowy morning during the following winter, that Margaret's first child, Anna, was born. She had been a happy child with a father's good nature and fair good looks, and the births of her 2 younger brothers caused her no undue jealousy. Her upbringing was as practical and sensible as her mother's and father's had been. She early learnt the simple virtues of truthfulness and neighbourliness, prized perhaps more keenly in a place where all one's past was an open book, and encouraged in the low church of St. Jude's, where the family worshipped regularly every Sunday morning. She had grown into a straight-backed, long-legged girl with a mop of fair curly hair, which defied any of Anna's attempts to wean it from its natural exuberance to more sleek and modish styles. She had cycled, as her mother had done, the few miles to the same school, and had been taught by several of those teachers who had taught her mother too. Her academic ability was average, her disposition patient and cheerful, her health boisterous. Her pleasure in children's company extended even to that of her vociferous young brothers. It was no wonder that she was advised to take up teaching by her headmistress. Margaret too was pleased when Anna decided to accept the advice and had filled in her forms for admission to a training college for teachers. Firstly, she wanted to be happy and to be engaged in work which she was capable of doing with zest and efficiency. Secondly, she wanted the girl to do something useful in the world. Her own family and her husband's had been brought up in the tradition of useful service to those among whom they lived. Using one's talents was the theme of many a sermon by her present vicar, and it chimed with their own feelings and experience. Both these reasons she spoke of to Anna and to her husband Patrick. As is the way with fathers, was very content to leave the arrangements to his womenfolk, but was wholeheartedly in favour of Anna's choice and generous in his financial proposals to the girl. It's good training, was his verdict. Working with children will stand you in good stead if you have a family of your own, and if you don't, well, others people's children are the next best thing. What's more, he added with practical wisdom, you can earn a living wherever you choose to go in the world and have a pension at the end of it, which is more than I shall. He had ruffled his daughter's yellow hair and gone out, whistling to feed the pigs. For him, the matter was comfortably settled. To Margaret, his prosaic assessment of the decision was only part of the matter. There was another reason for her pleasure in Anna's choice, which Margaret had not mentioned to her husband. It would mean that she would have a few more years at her studies, and that the love of books and poetry, which meant so much, and to which she could afford to give so little time in her own busy, everyday existence, would be fostered in Anna. For Margaret believed that the love was there, but not yet fully awakened. So far in Anna's 18 years, the healthy open-air life of the farm, riding with her brothers, playing games with her friends, and relishing all the joys that a windy, wide meadow and the glittering river offered, had filled the girl's time. But, as Margaret knew, there were things of the mind which could offer a more powerful refreshment of the spirit. As the years passed, she had found the distillation of men's experience, the essence of their emotions and beliefs in prose or poetry, a source of inner strength and comfort. The second commandment, to love thy neighbour as thyself, was the everyday standard to which the family had set itself, and which, by dint of good fellowship, pleasant circumstances, an unhurried way of life, and a genuine warm-hearted interest in those around them, it was comparatively easy to keep. It was a rule of thumb code of behaviour which could carry a man successfully through a lifetime, but Margaret knew it was not enough. She realised that the first and great commandment held the key to essential happiness. To recognise absolute goodness and absolute truth, translated in terms of fine music, painting or poetry, was to feel that answering, powerful, thrilling rightness which one knew one shared with mankind the world over. It was this mercurial leap of the spirit to something above and beyond it which Margaret wanted her daughter to know. The incandescent flash caused by the fusion of two minds, albeit centuries apart. Without it, Anna could live the useful, happy life her father envisaged, but with it, her mother knew, something rich and strange would weave its unalloyed gold thread through the serviceable homespun of her working days. During the early part of the evening, after Anna had told her mother of the afternoon's happenings, the girl wandered through the garden to a leafy lane nearby. The air was very still. Far away she could hear the sound of her father's baler click-clacking in a distant hayfield. She leaned upon a gate and looked at the wheat spreading acre after acre before her. It was sturdy and green, and the girl realised with a start that by the time it had turned golden, she would be teaching, and would not be there to see all the days of harvest. For the first time she had doubts. The great new primary school flashing with glass and rows of little tables in each classroom for the infants and juniors, and the formidably long queues of children traversing the endless corridors had daunted her. It was unlike any of the schools she had met before, either during school practice at college or in the rural neighbourhood of her home country. The building, she admitted, was magnificent. Never had she seen such lightness and colour, such gleaming expanses of floor, and such flashing rows of wash basins. Around this palace had stretched 10 acres of grass, beyond the immaculate asphalt area, which would have served many schools as their only playground. And yet the place had depressed her. She remembered the string of new factories which she had passed on her way there that afternoon. The school was not unlike them at first sight, massive, immaculate, teeming with life and yet impersonal. She remembered the square red brick school which she herself had attended, its comfortable domestic outline shrouded in homely creepers. Her 200 girls had worked and played and had thought themselves a large body of people. How would she fare with 600 under one roof? Ah, well, thought Anna philosophically, plucking a sprig of honeysuckle and smelling it while she could. There were all the summer holidays before her. The great school, the ugly, raw new estate, and Mrs. Flynn were a long way ahead. Meanwhile, all the joys of home and summer thronged about her. The whinny of her pony in the paddock lifted her spirits, and retracing her steps, Anna made her way back to the home, which, to her surprise, suddenly seemed doubly dear. As she emerged from the leafy tunnel of the lane, the sound of the hay baler came more clearly, thumping out its cheerful noise across the golden evening fields. Make hay while the sun shines, quoted Anna aloud. It seemed as encouraging a proverb as any under the circumstances, and much comforted, she ran up the flagged path and into the open door.